Hi, I'm Hana-chan or Hannah, whatever you want to call me, I don't care. Preferably you call me Hannah. Anyway, I am not a furry. But I've been reflecting on my internet life/presence lately in regards to my involvement in the furry community, or lack thereof, despite most of the media that I've consumed has involved anthropomorphic animals. Even when it comes to my journey as a digital artist, drawing animals, anthro or feral, has been my strongest forte, yet I didn't come to the game for the sake of being part of the furry community, and went to stick with drawing whatever makes me happy. If anything, I never consider myself as a furry, and I think that's okay. I've always appreciated the furry community from time to time though, and this would eventually lead to me thinking about how most of the fandoms that I've been in, or at least the ones that I listed on my card website, are either predominantly furry or have small side communities for furries. So I thought to myself, hey, how about I indulge myself in ranking these fandoms whether or not they're packing the heat when it comes to looking into the furry side of things. Also to add, I'm going off from my own personal experiences for each of the fandoms that I'm in. Therefore, I'm just exposing myself at this point. So if you want to disagree with me and roast me on this tier list, feel welcome to do so. With that being said, let's head on to the tier list. But hold up before I continue, if you're new to my channel, hi, I don't tend to get active here on YouTube every so often aside from posting speed paints or some shit posts here and there. I'm way more active on other platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, DeviantArt, and Tumblr. And I also post my art over there. I let my art speak for themselves more so than my videos. I figured I'd spice some things up for a bit with adding some variety on my channel. Hey, for the time being, be glad that it's not a speed paint video. But hey, if you want to see more content like this, then I wouldn't mind doing it again. Alright, time to get into the meat of the video. I'm sure you've seen how these tier lists work at this point, though my tiers aren't going to be named with S, A, B, or C, and are going off from, and as I mentioned earlier, whether or not these fandoms I've been in are packing heat when looking into the furry side of things. Here's how this is going to work. For all of the tiers, I'll be starting my sentence off by saying, I've acknowledged the furry side of things, but, and then I'll decide whether the fandom would be in the bottom, middle, or top. Speaking of, let's talk about the tiers from the bottom to the top. For the bottom tier, I've acknowledged the furry side of things, but you're not enough for me. This tier is for the fandoms that I feel like, even when a fandom of a certain media contains anthro animals, there's not a lot of thought to put into regarding it having a big furry fan base. There's one fandom and one fandom only that would make it into that tier, but I'll get into it later throughout this video. Heading to the next tier, I've acknowledged the furry side of things, but I've been here for different reasons. This tier is for the fandoms that have either predominantly furry communities or small side communities for furries, and even when I've acknowledged them, I've never gone too deep into that rabbit hole and went on to do other things instead. Spoiler alert, this tier is going to be the most filled compared to the other tiers. After that, I've acknowledged the furry side of things. This is a hit or miss moment. I could say that this tier is a bit like the different reasons tier, except I may have gone down a bit into the rabbit hole, but I still chose to do other things afterwards, and even question myself a bit. Next, I've acknowledged the furry side of things, but I went for a robot afterwards. Very self-indulgent and self-explanatory tier. This is another tier where it will contain one fandom and one fandom only. I'm sure you can figure out which fandom I'm referring to, but again, I'll get into that later. And finally, the top tier, I've acknowledged the furry side of things. This is a denial acceptance moment. This tier is for coming to terms with the fandoms that I'm in regarding their massive furry presence. Let the mixed emotions begin, the heat is on. And even for me to go through all of that and putting the furry influence aside, I also want a chance to talk about what I think about the media that I've been consuming in general, and this goes to all of the other fandoms that I'm going to be mentioning here throughout this video, really. Now that we got the tiers out of the way, let's get into ranking the fandoms. Starting off, we're heading into the Mouse House. I mean, if you think about it, Mickey Mouse is basically Walt Disney's persona. Honestly, I feel like every Disney film will have a fandom and niche that would go through both the good, the bad, and the ugly, so why not group them together in one? Though I'll be focusing on Disney films that contain animals such as Robin Hood, The Lion King, Bolt, and Zootopia, to name a few. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be bringing up the latter a lot for this one because as much as I can acknowledge what Zootopia has done for the furry community and my sudden love for the film and its fandom has also become the highlight and one of the magnum opuses of my art journey and internet life, at the same time, I wanted to stay under the Disney umbrella when it comes to my Zoot content and don't want anything to do with the furries. I want to do my own thing. So I am going to sound like a broken record in this section, so be prepared to hear me get rambly, unfortunately. Now, Zootopia came to me during a time when I was at a low point in my life, and even when I was looking forward to the film, it wasn't a film that I had massive hype for compared to the other animated movies that were coming out in 2016. I knew that I would enjoy it, but holy crap, I never thought I'd adore it to the fullest. Not only would the film become the missing puzzle piece my soul's been looking for, that sounds very cheesy, I know, but it encouraged me to take digital art seriously, if anything. Zoot has been one of my favorite Disney movies to come out during the 2010s, and Nick and Judy have been my comfort characters since then. During the mid to late 2010s, Disney/Pixar fan art was becoming a forte of mine, and like I said before, I wanted to stay under the umbrella regarding my Zoot content. And I've come to a point in my life that I've become a black and white thinker when it comes to my presence within the Zootopia fandom. On one hand, it can be exhausting to be known as the Zootopia girl due to how the content I would make for the film and fandom would get more attention compared to the content I would make for other Disney/Pixar films. On the other hand, I long for the day when someone comes up to me and asks what's my favorite Disney movie and I would say Zootopia. I hope I don't get thrown with a response like, oh, are you a furry then? My usual answer for a favorite Disney movie is The Lion King. I mean, I still can't be wrong for that fact. It's the big classic and #1 film for me, but like, let me just change things up a bit. Like, I want someone who I can at least gush over with, whether or not we have anything in common when it comes to our favorite films or anything that we're like very, very passionate about, really. In the very beginning, I prefaced that I'm okay with not putting the furry label upon myself. And as I've acknowledged getting furry followers, at the same time, I didn't want to disappoint or hurt them just because I didn't want to label myself one. And let's say even if I was a furry, I can assure you that I'd still get irked and exhausted to the point that I have to go by my sentiment with Zootopia sticking with me in regards of my presence and branding within the Disney fandom and want nothing to do with the furry community, really. Like, again, I just wanted to do my own thing. I even feared of getting torn apart just because I still didn't want to put that label upon myself, and even I feared having boundaries disrespected. I remember going through it once. It wasn't that great. So going through all of that during the early years of the Zoot fandom, it was overwhelming and hard to navigate. For how I'm going about it now, I don't mind the furry community regarding my Zootopia presence, but you know, again, I'm still staying under the Disney umbrella. I want to do my own thing. Ultimately, and all of this is just wishful thinking at this point, but I hope other people can catch a better glimpse when it comes to me making content for other Disney movies aside from Zootopia. Like, I want to talk about other movies like The Lion King, The Little Mermaid, Moana, Lilo and Stitch, Mulan, Big Hero 6, and Wreck-It Ralph, just to name a few. I know I've been rambling a lot, so you're probably wondering where I will put the Disney fandom. Well, if I were to talk about Zootopia as a standalone thing and not bring up other Disney films, especially the animal films that I have mentioned earlier, I'd put it in denial acceptance moment, but for the sake of grouping every film in one package, and I guess the entirety of the Disney fandom overall, it's going to be in the different reasons tier. Regarding the other animal films that I mentioned in the beginning of this section, and again, my overall presence in the Disney fandom, I couldn't see myself getting too deep into that rabbit hole, and I think that's okay. I became a bit vanilla afterwards, and I'll leave it at that for that section for this video. With all of that said and done, let's head on to the next fandom, which is My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. I mean, we got the Bronies and Pegasus sisters, so I feel like they share the same kind of sentiment with the furries. And I'm a Pegasus sister myself, though I can't say that I went on to do other things during my time in the fandom and not dwell on its rabidness and infamy. I think the closest I've seen of Friendship is Magic having anthros would include Iron Will, Equestria Girls, Princess Twilight and Sunset specifically, and Capper from the 2017 movie, just to name a few. I could be wrong, by the way. I stopped watching the show around the time season 6 was ongoing. I feel like Capper might fit the bill, though. He's basically Cat Nick Wilde. With that being said, Friendship is Magic is going onto different reasons tier. Let's go to the Mario fandom we go. I feel like this can go in so many ways. Exhibit A. We've seen Mario in a tanuki suit, we've seen him in a cat suit, and we've even seen him as an elephant. Exhibit B. You may or may not have sim for Bowser. I feel more at home with Exhibit B, but I'm at my falling head over heels for the baddies arc right now. Also, honorable mention goes to me having a girl crush on Harriet from Super Mario Odyssey. But alas, I never went too far, and for that, Mario's going to different reasons tier. After that, we're heading on to two fandoms that I feel like both share the same kind of sentiment, and those two being Rio and Ice Age. I go way back with these franchises as they've become part of my internet life during the 2010s, early 2010s especially, but that's a whole other story. Aside from being Blue Sky Studios' successful franchises, where these two would fall on the same boat would have to be me falling head over heels for some of the animal characters. Yet, I never went further into the furry side of things afterwards. Both are going to different reasons for sure. With Rio, I recall 11-year-old me having a crush on Pedro. Okay, unpopular opinion, I've always preferred Pedro to Nico. Everybody be talking about having a crush on Nico, and I'm like, hi, yes, hello. Is there anyone else who have a love for Pedro besides me? If you want to be mad at me about it, go argue with the wall. Eat my shoes. But I'll be fair, I'll be honest, Pedro's actually my second favorite character from Rio, with my number one favorite being Jewel. I also had a crush on Roberto from Rio too. It's Bruno Mars voicing him for me, and I love Bruno. He's one of my favorite singers. I'm even certain that the Rio fandom introduced me to avians, which are basically like the bird version of furries, but then again, I didn't go any further. Whereas with Ice Age, 11-year-old me also had a crush on Buck from Ice Age 3. Even I had a bit of a crush on Diego and Shara around the time Continental Drift came out, and that's about it. I did gain a decent following regarding Ice Age when it came to my love for Buck, and once again, I didn't go any further regarding the furry stuff. Up next, we have the Sonic fandom. Sonic is the #1 video game furry mascot at this point, and I just need to let the facts sink in that it's been a decade since I went through a Sonic phase, and I kind of got involved with the Sonic fandom in a way. Now, while I have played some of the games as a kid, this ranged from replaying them to rewatching the Sonic shorts and Sonic X to looking into Sonic fanart on DeviantArt months before I made my account over there, to 12-year-old me having a crush on Espio, Shadow, and Silver back in 2013. Shadow especially. No, I'm not going down that kind of territory. Like, that's a whole other story, and it's very cringy. But anyway, given that the fact that this franchise has characters where the majority are anthro animals, I never got that far with the furry stuff and was revisiting the nostalgia I had with Sonic. So for that, I had to put Sonic in different reasons tier. Time to take a look at the first two fandoms of my PlayStation nostalgia, and those two being Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. But with that comes a twist. These two fandoms are going into separate tiers. I'm mostly going to speak on experiences during modern times ever since these two had their revivals back in the mid-2010s. Starting off with Crash, if you think about it, the orange marsupial is the second video game furry mascot next to Sonic, but then again, I played a lot of Crash when I was a little way before getting into Mario and Sonic. I'm pretty sure I looked into the furry territory regarding Crash at some point prior to being in the fandom during NSYNC Trilogy's release, but other than that, my love for the games has always been stemmed by the nostalgia and memories I had when playing them as a kid. So leading to looking into it now while being part of the fandom, if having crushes on some of the Nitro Squad girls from Nitro Fuel counts, then so be it. I mean, I can't blame anyone for that at all. It's completely understandable, you guys are valid. But other than that, I never gotten that far, so I had to put Crash in different reasons tier. If anything, I could put Crash between the different reasons and hit or miss tiers, though for the time being, it's going to be in different reasons. Moving on with Spyro, I feel like I was more involved with Spyro than Crash during their revivals. I wouldn't get my hands on Insane Trilogy until it was announced that the game would come to the Switch back in 2018, and Reignited Trilogy was also coming out in the same year. And then the following year, I'd get the Switch port for Reignited Trilogy. Anyways, where I was more involved with Spyro was having to make a lot of fan art back in 2018, where most of the fan art for Spyro consists of Bianca from Year of the Dragon. I've also drawn Hunter and Alora. I rarely draw the purple boy. I have at least drawn him like 2 times so far. Now listen, I have a massive bias for Year of the Dragon. Not only for my love for Bianca, but I was born on Year of the Dragon. I was born in 2000. My Chinese zodiac is the dragon. Next Lunar New Year will be Year of the Dragon. I hope we can get a new Spyro game, and there's also a baby dragon named after me in the game, in Evening Lake. Regarding drawing Bianca, drawing her feels reminiscent of me drawing Judy from Zootopia. This was my head over heels for rabbits arc. You give me Judy Hopps from Zootopia, then Harriet from Super Mario Odyssey, and now Bianca from Year of the Dragon, and I don't think I can be mad at that. I really adored Bianca when I was a kid. We're getting a bit further down the rabbit hole at this point, pardon the pun and phrasing, and you're probably wondering if I've been through the scaly territory regarding the Spyro fandom. I did for a bit, and I may or may not have been head over heels for some of the dragons from the first game. Nestor, Bubba, Jed, and Cyprin, just to name a few. Cyprin especially, just because I really love the pose that he was making. Paint me like one of your French dragons, Spyro. Other than that, I feel like with the Spyro fandom, it's going to hit or miss. Just like with Crash, I could put Spyro between the different reasons and hit or miss tiers, but given how much experience I had in terms of furry territory with Spyro compared to Crash, Spyro's staying in hit or miss for the time being. How I became more involved with Spyro compared to Crash, even though Crash was my introduction to video games, or at least that's what my dad claims, is beyond me. I feel like Mario was my introduction to video games since we have a SNES in the house, but then again, I played a lot of Crash during my childhood, so had not I played Crash, Spyro, or even Ratchet & Clank, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. Speaking of Ratchet & Clank, this fandom gets a very special tier, that being, I went for a robot afterwards. Yes, I was head over heels for a robot. The evil one, the purple one. Simping for Dr. Nefarious is one of the highlights of my overall Ratchet & Clank fandom experience, if anything. But anyway, what about going into furry territory when it comes to Ratchet & Clank? I know there are people who have simped for either Angela, Sasha, or even Rivet at some point, and looking back on how I dabbled onto Ratchet & Clank for a bit back in 2016, which was also around the time the animated film and PS4 game came out, I never gone that far. And given that this was during 2016, which was also the same year I had big Zootopia brain. Again, I still didn't want anything to do with the furry community at that point. Leading to 2020, which is where I fully joined the Ratchet & Clank fandom, and this was also around the same time where Rift Apart was first announced and Rivet was receiving fanfare. Honestly, I won't forget how emotionally attached I was to Rivet when I first saw her, despite the fact that we didn't know her name around that time. I do feel like she has more potential as a character, and I hope to see more of her in Kit in future Ratchet & Clank games. So, did I get a bit further on furry territory at this time? Rightfully so. Honestly, if Ratchet & Clank didn't get its own special tier, I could put it in between the hit or miss and went for a robot tiers. Like I said, I summed up my Ratchet & Clank experience by confessing my love for Dr. Nefarious. It also doesn't help with the fact that most Ratchet & Clank fan art that I've done consists of either Rivet or Nefarious. I go both ways. I'm attracted both to furries and robots. Moving along, we have the Sanrio fandom. This might sound a bit of an odd choice, but let's be honest, I think all of us can go for some Sanrio in our lives. Where I express most of my involvement regarding Sanrio, I feel feel like would go with some of the merch that I own, like some plushies and shirts, and kinning Gudetama and Kuromi, Gudetama especially. Now, regarding furry territory with Sanrio, okay, well, there are a couple of anthro characters such as Hello Kitty, Kuropi, My Melody, and Kuromi to name a few. Those were my thoughts at first. And then I was hit with a reminder that xXHanaChanXx is also Sanrio. And I have known and acknowledged that xXHanaChanXx has a solid furry following. I've known of the anime, I just never got around watching it. Therefore, I never went that far regarding furries within Sanrio, and the fact that I said I never got around watching xXHanaChanXx definitely shows. So, just like with Ratchet & Clank, Sanrio gets its own special tier, and that being, you're not enough for me. If I did give xXHanaChanXx a watch, then I feel like Sanrio could end up in either of the next two tiers. You know what? I'm just gonna show you this video of this Gudetama figure that a friend of my dad gave me many months ago because I feel like it has more impact than this section of this video.
Can you not? Please stop. Leave me alone. Don't care.
Alright, we're down to the last two fandoms and my current hyperfixations. Those two being The Bad Guys and Puss in Boots. Other than being DreamWorks films that were both released in 2022 and having Big Bad Wolves and me simping for them, apparently, these two will be ending up together in the same tier. What do they have in common? Well, other than having wolves in their movies and simping for them like I mentioned earlier, I had come to terms with these fandoms' massive furry presence to the point that the mixed emotions have begun, especially with The Bad Guys. To denial acceptance tier you go, both of you. Starting off with The Bad Guys, looking into the film and its fandom felt a bit reminiscent to my Zootopia days, though Bad Guys hit different compared to Zoot. And by all means, I'm not comparing to uplift something and tear down the other. Don't get that shit twisted. And maybe saying that alone, I feel like is coming from how I had to navigate all of this as an adult. And the same thing can be said with Puss in Boots. Like I said before, I didn't want any involvement regarding the furry community in regarding my presence within the Zootopia fandom. In recent years, I don't mind it, but then again, I still want to stay under that Disney umbrella. Whereas with The Bad Guys, I felt like I was getting involved with furry territory for a bit. So what was it that I saw in The Bad Guys that made me understand better and go further onto furry territory? Well, there's a lot of ways on how you could see it. You've either simped for Mr. Wolf or Diane Foxington, maybe even both. I'm one of them. They're my bisexual fuel, if anything. And then there's Wolf's praise kink and bottom energy. I don't mean to act like that on main, but I am not taking constructive criticism on that either. Whereas with Puss in Boots and I guess the entirety of Shrek at this point. Anyway, looking into furry territory has been present ever since The Last Wish was released last December, and for me to get around watching the movie around January.
Man, how are you that small?
Even when the first trailer for the film was released last March, when I saw death, I felt the simping was coming from a mile away, and I wasn't left disappointed. Now, I have a big spot for the 2011 Puss film, so I never thought in a million years that the Puss fanatic in me would be simping for the Grim Reaper's persona. So, to put the furry influence aside, what are my general opinions regarding the two fandoms and these films, really? With Bad Guys, I had fun with the film for sure, despite finding the story cliche, but the characters and animation really sold it for me. There's even gonna be a Christmas special coming up this year on Netflix, and honestly, I'm looking forward to it. And with Puss, it's been nearly 2 decades since his debut in Shrek 2, and as I mentioned earlier, I have a big spot for the first 2011 film, his first movie. It was one thing for me to look forward to The Last Wish, but even then, I didn't have a lot of hype for it. When it comes to my love for the first Puss film, it was one of those films where an old school friend and I would talk about and reenact the scenes from back in elementary school. I'm gonna try my best to not get too deep with my personal life, but those memories are the last thing that I have to think about when looking into The Last Wish. And around the time of those memories, when all of that was happening, it was also a shitty period in my life, and I felt like my friend was my saving grace. And it kind of sucks that he's not going to know how much he's saved my life when I was at my lowest, and he's probably doing other things in his life. Even I would think about the idea of reuniting one day and ask him if he has seen The Last Wish, and even remind him of those memories of us reenacting the first Puss film. So leading to the release of The Last Wish, like I said in the beginning, while I didn't have a lot of hype for it, I do feel like this movie deserves the acclaim. I definitely had a good time with it. I love the animation, I love the message, and simping for Death aside, Death was a spectacular antagonist. I even need to let the fact sink in that Death is canonically a Shrek character now. Overall, it's one thing to be familiar with Puss in Boots because of Shrek, and rightfully so, yet the two Puss movies are where I show my love and appreciation for him the most. And there you have it, the final results. That's the tier list. As I prefaced in the very beginning of the video, I'm going off from personal experiences, whether the fandoms that I'm in are furry or not. So again, if you want to roast and or disagree with me, feel welcome to do so. Other than that, this was an interesting tier list to make, and I had a fun time in exposing myself. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, I wouldn't mind doing something like this again. And hey, the more variety on this channel, the better. With that being said, thank you so much for watching this video, and I apologize if this was a stupid video for me to make. If you like this video, feel welcome to give it a thumbs up. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, feel welcome to subscribe today. It's okay if you don't want to. We'll hang out again in the future one day, who knows. Don't forget to check out my social media platforms in the description below, and feel welcome to share this video if you like. With that being said, that's the end of the video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!